Hello, everybody, and happy Monday. It's September the 16th of 2024, and it's 11 a.m. here on Mystery Island on the East Coast of the United States in southern Maryland. We're about 50 miles south of Washington, D.C., if you're wondering, and that makes us closer to Fredericksburg, Virginia, than to Washington, if I do my map reading correctly. So, we're near the Potomac River. We get to walk around the island and see the beautiful river and other rivers around. It's a nice place to live when you're not tied down to that day job. Now that I've gotten out of my law practice, I am able to spend my time here, and it's really is a wonderful place. Um, well, thanks for joining me. And this morning's topic is who's afraid of Donald Trump? And of course, that's like who's afraid of the big bad wolf, or who's afraid of Roger Rabbit, if you remember that movie. Um, Somebody is scared to death that Donald Trump might be the next president. And these shooters that pop up, I mean, if if you follow the investigations into them, and I highly recommend George Webb's Substack on this whole issue of the grooming of these young 15-year-old boys to become snipers and bomb throwers, and just it's a horrific story. But if you look into the Thomas Crooks history, you'll see they're being groomed. And this other guy, I mean, he's a lot older than Crooks. This guy, what was his name again? Routh, Routh. Oh, Ruth. My producer says Ruth. Okay. All right. I won't tell you my joke about. No, I won't do it now. I'm trying to be serious about this, and this is kind of the question that should be on everybody's minds is who's behind all these shootings. And I think one of the easiest things to rule out is the idea that they're staged by Donald Trump to gain sympathy or something like that. You scratch the surface and you'll find that that just doesn't hold water. The tendency of our Democratic voting friends is to not scratch the surface, to always continue to assume whatever they're told on NBC News is all they need to know. And it's a sad thing. Um, Brilliant people who have just not been able to see through. So what I'm trying to do today is to make it more clear, make it harder not to look. And I want to start with one of the books I started my show with, and it's this one right here, The Phoenix Program by Douglas Valentine. Now, a page from the introduction to start the show, if you don't mind. Let's remind everybody this was published in 1990, and this is the second edition, so 2000. But 1990, that's a long time ago, and the work that Doug put into this is still priceless. So I'll start here. Developed in 1967 by the Central Intelligence Agency, Phoenix, this is the Phoenix program, combined existing counterinsurgency programs in a concerted effort to, quote, neutralize, unquote, the Viet Cong infrastructure, the VCI. The euphemism neutralize means to kill, capture, or make to defect. The word infrastructure refers to those civilians suspected of supporting the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers, like the one targeted in Elton Manzione's final operation. Central to Phoenix is the fact that it targeted civilians, not soldiers. As a result, its detractors charge that Phoenix violated that part of the Geneva Convention guaranteeing protection to civilians in time of war. By analogy, said Ogden Reed, a member of the congressional committee investigating Phoenix in 1971, if the Union had a Phoenix program during the Civil War, its targets would have been civilians like Jefferson Davis or the mayor of Macon, Georgia. Something to think about. Under Phoenix, or Phung Hoang, as it was called in Vietnamese, due process was totally non existent. South Vietnamese civilians whose names appeared on blacklists could be kidnapped, tortured, detained for 2 years without trial, or even murdered simply on the word of an anonymous informer. At its height, Phoenix managers imposed quotas of 1,800 neutralizations per month on the people running the program in the field, opening up the program to abuses by corrupt security officers, policemen, politicians, and racketeers, all of whom extorted innocent victims, innocent civilians, as well as the VCI. Legendary CIA officer Lucien Conin described Phoenix as, quote, a very good blackmail scheme for the central government. If you, quote, if you don't do what I want, you're VC, unquote. Because Phoenix neutralizations were often conducted at midnight while its victims were home sleeping in bed, Phoenix proponents described the program as a scalpel designed to replace the bludgeon of search and destroy operations, airstrikes, and artillery barrages that indiscriminately wiped out entire villages and did little to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese population. Yet, as Elton Manzione's story illustrates, the scalpel cut deeper than the US government admits. Indeed, Phoenix was, among other things, an instrument of counter-terror. The psychological warfare tactic in which VCI members were brutally murdered, along with their families or neighbors, as a means of terrorizing the neighboring population into a state of submission. Such horrendous acts were, for propaganda purposes, often made to look as if they had been committed by the enemy. This book questions how Americans, who consider themselves a nation ruled by laws and an ethic of fair play, could create a program like Phoenix. By scrutinizing the program and the people who participated in it, and by employing the program as a symbol of the dark side of the human psyche, the author hopes to articulate the subtle ways in which the Vietnam War changed how Americans think of themselves. This book is about terror and its role in political warfare. It will show how, as successive American governments sink deeper and deeper into the vortex of covert operations, ostensibly to combat terrorism and communist insurgencies, the American people gradually lose touch with the democratic ideals that once defined their national self-concept. This book asks, what happens when Phoenix comes home to roost? Well, I think we have an answer. The answer is that assassinations happen, that the government uses a murder incorporated style of terrorism, that we have put in place since 1990 a network of Phoenix program activities throughout our government, our military, our corporations, everywhere. It's all tuned to kick off the end of our liberties and the beginning of rule by terror. So isn't it interesting that we have the only real bastion against this in Donald Trump, a man who is the Republican nominee, or will be, or is, I guess he is, for the presidency. And we're going to vote in what, about 7 weeks now, November 5th. And the proposition that we hear from the other side was well explained by Mike Benz, who's been very active on Twitter lately, and I certainly recommend folks check him out. That's Benz. Well, he explained that the whole American use of the dark hand of violence to achieve political ends began at the end of World War II. And we've talked about the Angletons and James Angleton and all of the Operation Gladio, Operation Sunrise. I mean, we have, among my work and many others, documented that this was a project that was coordinated by Allen Dulles for his clients at Sullivan and Cromwell, and not for the good of the American people. But this program, which involved hiring murderers, hiring thugs, setting off bombs, paying off politicians right and left, paying off periodicals, newspapers, the church, all of that was the overt use of the dark hand by the United States of America to control the so-called elections in Italy after World War II, because communism was on the ballot, because the communists had been in the resistance, because the communists were organized and the communists had a lot of followers. And so we did this kind of mental adjustment. And we justified it by doing this, by saying, look, if the communists win the election, then they'll get into power. And if they get into power, then they're never going to allow another election. That's going to be the end of democracy in Italy. So the idea of us just standing aside and letting the communists come in and take over Italy, I mean, this extremely important, country right there in the middle of the Mediterranean and all the trade and the history. I mean, it's just unthinkable. How could we let Italy go communist? Because the problem is that in order to keep Italy democratic, you can't let the communists win. And so at some level, and I suspect, this is at the Harry Truman, listening to the Dulles brothers and also Winston Churchill. Nod and a wink, go ahead. However, they signed off on it. It became U.S. policy to use terrorism to control an election in the situation where the loss of the election means the end of democracy. And I really think that is exactly it. And now that justification is being aimed at Donald Trump. because they have created this mass formation psychosis, as we tend to use that phrase to identify the phenomenon of great large masses of people believing something that they shouldn't believe, believing that we have to defeat Donald Trump because if he wins, then that's the end of democracy. He'll just never allow another election. He's going to be the emperor. He's going to be the king. I mean, listen to all this rhetoric, you know. And so they've built this case built on the exact same argument that the CIA and its predecessors used to control the Italian people's right to elect whoever they wanted to use the same logic to control the American people's right to elect whoever they want to. So Donald Trump is a target of assassination. And there are lists and blacklists of other people who are targets for assassination. And just putting somebody on the list, if it's like the Ukrainian government's list, like they've done to many people I've talked to on this show, that, of course, is terrorism. It's intimidation with the threat to your life. So who is it who is so afraid of Donald Trump that they've gone to all the trouble to build this mass formation psychosis, that they have owned all of the media, that they own all the politicians that are against Trump, and they have, I mean, through blackmail and other tactics, they have controlled the Congress. Whoever thought of a U.S. Congress in which a large majority waves the flag of a foreign country, and many of them proudly claim dual citizenship? How in the hell can you expect somebody to be loyal to the United States when they have an equal duty to be loyal to another country? And yet we let this happen, and we let our senior people in the State Department, in the executive branch, the Congress, and probably at some level even in the courts by now. It's crazy. So the Phoenix program is one of the things that we studied with George Webb in the first 2 or 3 years of our show. It translates into JSOC, the Joint Special Ops something, and how JSOC is now the sits on top of all the branches of the military, and all of our bases now are joint bases. Bowling Air Force Base is now JBAB, Joint Base at Bowling. And the consolidation of all of these really separate units and services, even the FBI and local police, and unfortunately the sheriff's departments as well, which is an issue I want to talk about in a minute, into the joint JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, ostensibly there to be ready in case some terrorism happens, but also there to do the will of its superiors, even if that means acting against U.S. citizens. And at that assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, we know that the real Secret Service agents that should have been there, to surround Trump and to make sure that all of the angles of attack were covered, were somehow not there. And now in this second one, where he's shot or apparently attempted to shoot at it on his golf course, and there's a picture on the cover of Time magazine with him in his golf cart, stuck in a sand trap, with the idea that, with, I think it even said trouble ahead or something like that. And so now at his golf course, which we're told was an unscheduled round of golf, somehow somebody knew that he was going to be at a certain place at a certain time. And so this guy, this lifelong mercenary, this recruiter for CIA off projects, this guy Ruth, Routh. I mean, just study him. I mean, oh my, the history. What, 100 convictions in North Carolina, uh, convicted of carrying weapons of mass destruction. And there's a picture of his trunk with all of these electronic devices and his suitcases and all that. I mean, the guy's for real. And he spends his time getting Afghans and Pakistanis and people who are, desperate, want to be soldiers. Let's offer a platoon of Afghanis to the Ukrainians to see, and I'm sure that's something he does as a result of his participation in his aspect of the Phoenix program. And I want to thank someone who I had not known before. I just turned him up yesterday on my X feed, and his name is Colonel Towner, or Colonel Towner Watkins, and he's the one that gave me the idea for the show. Because he said this is the Phoenix program, and if you look, I'm just starting to explore his work, but if you look through his Twitter or X feed, you'll see he's got a lot of depth. He went really in deep on the Nugan Bank, which is one of the big stories I covered maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Do I have Whitney's book? Well, I can't hold it up for you, but I highly recommend that you read Jonathan Whitney's book, Crimes of Patriots, because in there you'll find people like the admirals and generals that were in on things, not only the Nugan Bank, but the Tonkin Gulf and all kinds of stuff that went on in that era. And it's all part of a greater effort to control the politics of the world. And in particular, unfortunately, the United States has been in their crosshairs for a long, long time. I mean, just like Doug Valentine said in his introduction, this book asks what happens when Phoenix comes home to roost. And what will happen if we don't stop it is that we're going to be decimated just like the Vietnamese were. Because as I've been working on this for 6, 7 years now, this whole Phoenix thing, the the bird, the Feng Wang, the theme of it, it comes unfortunately out of counterinsurgency doctrine. And this is where I think studying my dad in his office at Saxa would be really beneficial to folks that are trying to understand how we got here. You see, in 1961, Bay of Pigs convinced John F. Kennedy, the new president, that he could not trust the CIA and that the CIA was out of control and needed to be put back under control. And so he created an office in the Pentagon called SACSA. And he, by executive orders in SAM's National Security Action Memorandums, created the Joint Chiefs of Staff as his advisors in peacetime as well as wartime, and gave SACSA the overall supervision of all special operations, no matter whether it was military or civilian. It was all to cross through the hands of the SACSA, the guy that was in charge of SACSA, he was called the SACSA. SACSA stands for Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities. So 1962, sometime in late 61, my dad got recruited by some guys with the Defense Intelligence Agency to become part of this new agency that President Kennedy was creating called SACSA. And it appears that my dad was one of the first people recruited and was in it from the beginning. Now, the first SACSA was Marine General Victor Krulak, the older, not the younger one, who was unfortunately talked about very much in a very bad light by Kay Briggs, and you should watch all of Kay Briggs's interviews. But getting back to the senior one, he was Marine General, and he had some relationship with President Kennedy arising out of the rescue of Kennedy, who had just rescued some crew members when his PT boat got, I can't remember if it was rammed or what, but anyway, Krulak had some prior knowledge and contact with JFK when he was in the war, in the PT 109 story. I don't remember the details. You should probably look it up. It's pretty interesting story. So anyway, Krulak becomes the SACSA, and I've read through the beginning paperwork as much as is public, and you can see what was going on was Krulak was looking at the materials that were coming from, the McNamara people, the technocrats, and basically saying, "Oh, well, we already know all this stuff. We're Marines, we don't need to study, how to do counterinsurgency. We're the Marines." And so he puts together a plan which reflects his understanding of counterinsurgency and what it's all about from Krulak's point of view, and from most people, who would confront the problem offhand and say, what would we do to turn an insurgency back to the government? Well, what you do is you win their hearts and minds. That's what you do. You do things for them. You show them a future that they can be happy to see, that you can help them with health and education, and you can help them become successful people. Then they'll love you. Then they'll want to be part of your government. But that wasn't the kind of counterinsurgency that the CIA had in mind and was doing, under Lansdale and Shackley and Harvey and all the rest of them, Wisner. The CIA under Allen Dulles was in the cloak and dagger, black arts, terrorism business. And they didn't want to stop. They wanted to do it in Vietnam too. Because to them, all of these people that are just kind of in the way are worthless and they should be gotten rid of. They have a Nazi mentality, is what I'm saying. It's a mentality that we abhor when we watch our movies and say, oh my God, how could anybody think that way? Well, the people that think that way are the ones that create a Phoenix program. Now, in addition to having people that think that way, you also have to have financing. And you can't just ask the people, hey, I'd like to have $100 million to take over Laos, because the people will say, wait a minute, why do we need to take over Laos? Why don't we use $100 million here to build better schools or highways? What are you crazy? No, we got to take over Laos. Why? Don't ask why. We're doing it. Matter of fact, we've been doing it, and there's nothing you can do about it. What? You mean we're stuck? You mean you've committed us and we can't get out of it? That's right. That's right. So how do you pay for it if the American people don't want to pay for it? Well, gosh, you got to do something, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just fine to sell heroin. It's just fine to ship things for the drug lords, and it's just fine that it ends up in American ports and in American GI's arms, and it's just fine that our young people have their lives destroyed by drugs. That's okay. Because hey, they're really not worth keeping around. And so you see, it all fits in with the greater idea of eugenics that comes again from these great elite minds that think that they are the smartest people on earth. They say, well, as I can't remember who it was yesterday that I was watching, but he said, he put it this way. He says, these people think, oh, we've got to put on our big boy pants and take charge of our own evolution. That's another one of those, mental things that says, oh, okay, well, God's not looking out for us. Matter of fact, I think God is really just so remote. He doesn't give a damn about us. And yet here we are. We've got all these health problems where our age is limited. We can do better. I mean, I really think if God wanted to, he could have given us, 200 years or, I mean, why can't we take over when God obviously is not doing his job? And this is the Fabian idea. This is the whole idea of, we are going to bootstrap humanity up into the next level. I mean, some of them even go so far as to say that there's going to be this singularity, this unity in which we all are connected because we've refined humanity to the point where we can just mentally, communicate. People really believe that crap. And then people try to do it, by using electronics and brain chips and creating the Manchurian candidate, the Manchurian hitman. So I think that the answer to the question is that the people that changed Saxa, the people that got rid of my dad and got rid of Victor Krulak and replaced him with compliant Air Force and Army generals that were double-hatted because they still work for the CIA, brought this tragedy to life in the 60s in Vietnam, where people like my dad would say, "Well, why? Why would we don't need to Victor Krulak, we understand how to do counterinsurgency. We win their hearts and minds." But no, the CIA, they are already in the business of Phoenix program, terrorism. Been doing it since World War II. And who does it benefit? Not the people of the United States. As a matter of fact, we are the people that are still standing in the way of their total imposition of a Phoenix program solution to the world, to the final achievement of their new world order, which will be nothing more than an old world order with a whole lot less people in it, run by the new emperor or the new doge, as we called him in our last show. Meet the new doge, same as the old doge. A word about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and, Tucker Carlson and, this, supposedly new Justice League that's, with Tulsi Gabbard and, Jeffrey, Elon Musk. And, you've seen probably them together and even with AI Batman outfits and stuff. And we're supposed to, and Robert Malone is in that, the infamous doctor. And these guys are going to save us from the Democrats, the ones that want to go to war with Russia and blow up the world and gain control of the world through NATO. Because the Trump people, they're like, no, we don't want to do that. Why would we want to go, into foreign countries trying to run their business? Why can't we get back to America and make America great again? I mean, it's a great question. Why can't we? The reason we can't is the same reason that Victor Krulak could not do his Hearts and Minds program in Vietnam. It's because they have seized the levers of power in every major organization, whether it's government, military, or media, education, healthcare, everywhere. And the only way that's going to change is with a wide awakening by the American people that, yes, we are facing the Phoenix program here today, right now. And it's not only with shooters with sniper rifles, it's also being done with injecting poisons, with destroying education, with taking over healthcare, with a regime of lies that somehow gets pounded enough that people are willing to believe it. Oh, I saw another one that I wanted to share with you, this is from Eric Weinstein, who is a philosopher and physicist, brother of Brett Weinstein. And so, go with caution. But he's very smart. And one of the things that he said, and I think is very, very pithy for people that are in the economy that like unlike me, I'm somewhat insulated from it. But if you have a day job, then what he's saying is CNN, NBC, PBS, MSNBC, what these all are, these are um, crib books for you to keep your job. That if you watch the news and talk about it at work as if it reflects what really happened in the world, if you at least pretend to accept the narrative, then you can keep your job. But if you're not with, the narrative, if you're just becoming a pain in the ass because you ask hard questions, you're not going to keep that job. And that's another part of Phoenix program because your job is connected at some level with police, with FBI, with JSOC, with JTTF, with people that have the connections, and it's all computerized, and you're probably there on all of the lists already because you're a troublemaker. And so this is again another intimidation. And boy, if you don't get the message at some point, then it will come to an actual assassination. Now, is Donald Trump going to save us from all this? I don't think so. But I do think that the people who are going to vote for Donald Trump are going to save us from all this. Because if that 80 or 90 million people keep their eye on the facts, keep their feet to the fire, keep them honest, don't let Bobby Kennedy be the last word in healthcare. Don't let Donald Trump be the person that defines our foreign policy. Don't let their people who obviously are at a high enough level to be connected with the program, the Phoenix program, or whatever you want to call it. They know what it is. All we can hope is that they will control it. But how they use it, how they control it, depends upon us standing up as citizens and saying, no, we're not going to do another Vietnam. No, get out of Laos. No, get out of Ukraine. Rebuild America. Be proud of an effort to restore the promise of America. Don't let us succumb to the Phoenix program. I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to go over all this stuff once again with our great friend Harley Schlanger of the LaRouche and Schiller organizations. And hope you can join me then, 11 a.m. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Definitely check out Richard Poe's book, How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. It really is a great narrative that can fill in a lot of the blanks without, it's only a couple hundred pages, so you can do that. Always want you to read The Sleeper Agent by Adam Finnegan. So much of the talk right now cuts off about 2018, 2017. Well, oh, they did this, they did this, they did this, and here's who's to blame, and here's who's to blame. No, you got to go back to Eric Traub. You've got to study the Sleeper Agent, and the super antigens of biological warfare. And really, believe it or not, I'm kind of hopeful today. I had a nice conversation with Tony Chaikin over email this morning. He's working on a great project to start a conversation with people who really do have, audiences, like people with large followings on YouTube or Rumble or Odyssey or, other alternative platforms to have a real honest conversation of how are we going to avoid and get out from under the net of this horrible, horrible Phoenix program descending upon us right now as we speak. Thank you again. I'll see you tomorrow.